the grammar is saying that I'm the thing being taken with water. So that means that maybe there's some giant who's taking me as a pill, and I'm just this big, and I'm the one being taken with water. You may have heard a classic thing people say not to do. Never dangle a participle. If that doesn't make sense to you, if you haven't heard that, okay. But that is something that people often say. Dangling participles are very bad. Sometimes you hear dangling modifiers. Oh, what is this? What's going on? Well, that's what we're going to talk about. So, first of all, we're going to talk about what a participle is. Then we're going to actually go through some examples to understand the structure that we need to know before we can then look at examples of what people mean when they say, do not make dangling participles. Do not dangle participles. Do not dangle modifiers. Okay, so now that we have that context, let's just talk about what the heck a participle is. Okay, now this is not my definition. This is from the dictionary. Okay, copy and paste. I think it's from Webster. Might be Webster, Merriam-Webster. A word formed from a verb, going, gone, being, been, and used as an adjective, example, working woman, burned toast, or a noun, good breeding. Breeding would be using it as a noun there. In English, participles are also used to make compound verb forms. Now there you would see it in things like the present perfect tense, the past perfect tense, has been, is going, have been going, that sort of thing. We're not going to talk about participles used to make those grammar pieces used in, for example, the present perfect tense. I've talked about that elsewhere. What we're going to talk about is this first one here, used as an adjective. And this is very important. This is usually where we get into this do not do territory of dangling participles. Okay, so now we know what it means. Think about that. A word that is made from a verb. That's right, not all verbs are verbs. Some verbs are nouns. Think about, for example, I'm going running, okay? Or actually a better example would be I like running. That's a better example. I like running is using running as a thing. I like it. Okay, so that is the present participle of run. Again, we're not trying to get into much detail here. We're trying to understand what a dangling participle is, but we have to build up kind of slowly here. Okay, now we have to understand modifiers. Okay, so we know that a participle is a word that is made of a verb and is often, for example, used as an adjective. What is a modifier? Very simply, this is a word or a phrase. A phrase just means more than one word. That's all it is. A word or a phrase that tells you something about another word or sometimes phrase. That's all it is, okay? So I want you to look at this specific type here. Terrified, Thelma approached the sleeping lion. Now, if terrified is modifying Thelma, what is it telling me about Thelma? It is telling me that that is the feeling Thelma has as she approaches the sleeping lion, right? It is modifying Thelma. It is telling me about her. So if we were to take this away, would it be okay if we were to say Thelma approached the sleeping lion? Yeah, absolutely. Thelma is what we call the subject of the sentence. The thing in the sentence doing the action, doing the verb of approaching, right? What is she approaching? The object, which is the sleeping lion. Now I want to tell you more about Thelma and her state as she does that. Okay, so we say terrified. Now, is this considered a participle? And no, because terrified usually is just a simple adjective. Okay, so what about this next one? Trembling with fear, Thelma approached the lion. What is this doing? Well, it's also telling me about Thelma. It's also modifying Thelma. So it's kind of doing the same thing here. This phrase is the modifier. What is she doing? She's shaking, trembling. With what? Fear. That's just a way to say it. So trembling is a participle from the verb tremble. Trembling. Oh, trembling, trembling with fear. Okay. Stricken with terror, Thelma approached the lion. I got to get out of the way. Stricken with terror. Again, it's the same thing. The feeling is different because trembling is a feeling of doing it now, and stricken with fear is just her state, her condition as she approaches the lion, right? But this is also a participle here telling me about, okay, Thelma, and it's modifying it. So, okay, so this is a modifier, this is a modifier, and this is a modifier modifying Thelma. Okay, so now we understand that. Now, what is a dangling participle? This is a simple mistake where you put something, a modifier like this, and there are different types. The ones with participles are called dangling participles, and the ones without are just called dangling modifiers. You have this, but then you don't put a subject here, a thing that this is modifying, or you do the wrong way. You mix it up. You get it wrong, and it causes confusion. Okay, if that's not clear, I think the best thing for us to do is look at some examples, right? Okay, so let's do that. Looking out the window, a bunch of deer walked by. Okay, now think about this. When I say looking out the window, what do you picture? Who do you picture looking out the window? You picture me looking out the window probably right now, right? And as you see me looking out the window, you then imagine that, oh, look, some deer, and the deer walk by. Okay, so to you, this might make sense, and we can understand what it means because of who is saying it, kind of the context, right? But if we just focus on the grammar alone, and that's all we look at, a bunch of deer walked by is the subject. A bunch of deer. That's the subject of the sentence. And so this thing, looking out the window, which modifies the first thing after the comma, makes it seem like somehow a bunch of deer are both looking out the window and walking by. That's very confusing, right? So this is a problem with not having the correct subject in the sentence. Looking out the window, Luke spotted a bunch of deer walking by. Okay, now it makes sense. So all you need to do is put the correct subject in the correct place after the comma if you're writing it down. Looking out the window, looking out the window, Luke, and then what action I or Luke did. Saw, spotted, noticed a bunch of deer walking by. Okay, now it makes sense because it makes sense that I would be the one looking out the window. Taken with water, I can swallow the pills more easily. Okay, so this one might on the face of it seem to make a lot of sense. Taken with water, I can swallow the pills more easily. Yeah, okay. It's hard to swallow pills if you just put them in your mouth and try to swallow them, right? But if you look at it carefully, once again, you see some confusion. What is the thing being taken with water? If I say taken with water, the grammar is saying that I'm the thing being taken with water. So that means that maybe there's some giant who's taking me as a pill, and I'm just this big, and I'm the one being taken with water, right? Seen from space, the International Space Station, or the moon, or something, then we're talking about that first thing after the comma there. So this makes it look like, again, if we follow the grammar, that I'm the thing being taken with water. And that's not really possible unless gigantic aliens come down from space and start taking us humans as pills or something like that, right? So what we want to say, what we're trying to express with this poorly, is that the pills are easier to take when we have water, right? So taken with water, the pills can be swallowed easily. Taken with water, the pills. So you have to say the pills first to avoid it. If you don't, then you have a dangling modifier, a dangling participle. Why is it dangling? Because it doesn't have a correct subject that it's connected to. It's connected to the wrong thing, or it's connected to nothing, right? So that's where the confusion comes in, and that's why we say it is dangling. It's kind of hanging there, not connected to the right thing. Resting on the sofa, the stress of the day began to melt away. Can you see how it's dangling now? The way that we use modifiers is it has to be linked together. The modifier, if it's one word or phrase or whatever, has to be linked to the thing we're talking about. If we use a sentence structure like this, there are some examples and exceptions where that might not be true if we put something in the middle, but generally they should be linked together. And if it's not the right one, then it's dangling, okay? So here we have a subject, it looks like, but it's stress. Well, who's doing the resting? Stress can't rest on a sofa. Stress is a non-physical thing. It's a feeling. It's a thing that we experience. So what's happening here is the subject is missing. The thing or person or whatever that can experience stress isn't there, and that's the problem. So resting on the sofa, some person, Cheryl, we, right? Resting on the sofa, we felt the stress of the day beginning to melt away, or we felt the stress of the day melt away, right? So it has to be changed a little bit to make it correct, but the key thing is to have the correct subject there, okay? One more example, very quickly. Back to our lion thing that we talked about. Stricken with terror, the lion moved closer to where I was hiding. Okay, now, at first we think, okay, wait a second, I get it. I'm the one hiding. I'm stricken with terror. But the grammar doesn't say that. The grammar is saying that the lion is stricken with terror. So actually, the grammar of this is fine. It doesn't make sense because we don't know what's going on in a lion's head. And usually the lion is the one hunting, so it's not stricken with terror. It is causing terror. So, stricken with terror, I listened to the lion as it moved closer. I'm the one stricken with terror because there's a lion getting closer to me. The lion is not stricken with terror, okay? So that is really it. That is how we avoid using these dangling participles or dangling modifiers. It's a little bit complicated, but once you see a few examples, I hope it starts to feel more clear. Now you'll know when someone asks you what a dangling modifier is or a dangling participle is, you'll be able to at least give a couple of examples. If you have any questions for me, let me know. And if you haven't already done so, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe.